Hey guys, this is Q Country Road Podcast. I'm Tyler Pepe.
I'm Brandon Cork, and this is the WVU Sports Podcast by two suffering WVU fans.
All right, so let's get into it. We are going to recap the Oklahoma Sooner game against WVU, and then we are going to preview the Texas Tech versus WVU game on Saturday. So let's get into the recap. The final was 16-13. Oklahoma beat WVU. This was one where you're excited that we're able to hang with Oklahoma, but at the same time, this is one that didn't feel good to get a moral victory here. We let one slip away. Oklahoma never led that entire game until the very end. Lots of missed opportunities. How did you feel about the game?
Going into the game, if you had told me we would have lost 16-13 without any context, I would have been ecstatic. But watching the game and how it unfolded, and like you said, us never trailing, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, we had so many opportunities, I think, to put the game away, and our limitations offensively really just dug a hole for us. Whether it's mistakes like false starts from the 2-yard line, missing open receivers in the end zone, bad snaps or miscommunications on snaps, whatever that was in the fourth quarter. Those are things you can't do, especially in the one thing that I think is important too is whenever you're reducing the game to such a slow pace where you're not running too many plays. So I think we only had 3 offensive drives in the second half. So when you're only having 3 possessions, you got to make the most of those. And if you screw up once, then, those other 2 possessions, you're really pushing to score. And we didn't score. I don't think we scored on any of them. We might have a field goal, but whenever you're reducing it to that slow of a pace, you got to optimize your chances.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, other than the LIU game, we have 3 points in the second half versus Maryland, versus Virginia Tech, and versus Oklahoma. So, man, every game we get off to a fast start, which is great. You definitely want to put points up early and make the other team try to catch up to you, but you can't have duds in the second half every single week and expect to win consistently.
I agree. The one thing that I noticed is that, especially on the offense, because that's kind of where I focused most when I was rewatching it, is that, while we're trying to throw the ball downfield more, it's still not very successful. So I kind of lowered the bar for what I call the deep pass for Deggy, but anything over 10 yards is what I consider a deep pass. And he threw 8 of those passes against Oklahoma. 2 of them were completed. On the short throws, though, he was 20 for 24. And 14 of those 24 passes were slants or passes to the flats. So it just kind of goes to show you that how limited the Deggy is. And even when he is attempting to throw downfield, that 25% conversion rate, I don't think it's enough to scare defenses to put 2 guys back and load up the box too much.
Yeah, I think Deggy has proven. I don't remember very much about the 2 years ago when he played the second half of the season, but last year and this year, I think he's proven without a doubt the slant's his best route. He has a lot of success with it, and if our wide receivers are catching it, he doesn't do bad. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't get the ball downfield. And I heard a lot of people saying that the 2-quarterback system was throwing off the rhythm, and they were blaming Neil Brown for making those decisions as to why we lost. I'm the exact opposite. I say dual quarterbacks is great and do it more. I don't buy that excuse that it's throwing off rhythm and this and that. I mean, we were wasting timeouts in games earlier in the year when we were only using Deggy in there. So I think people are using that as an excuse. I say do it more because not only does Green provide a spark with his own abilities, but he elevates other people on the field. I had a feeling Letty did a lot better when Green was in the game, and I asked you to get this stat for me. The stat is more amazing than I even thought it would be. Letty with Daggy in the game. He had 11 carries for 20 yards. That is a 1.8 yard average. With Green in the game, he had 4 carries for 36 yards, 9 yards in average. And so these people who are saying don't do the dual quarterbacks, I'm sure they're saying just put Green in there full time, which I could get behind. But honestly, I still think the best opportunity for us to win is to use both quarterbacks. And we need to get Green in there more. I mean, we went right downfield and scored on them, chewed up so much clock in that game on the first drive. And then the second drive, Green doesn't even see the field. I can't even wrap my head around that decision.
Here's my favorite cherry pick stat that is completely irrelevant, but for the Green lovers out there, they're going to love this. So third quarter, the entire quarter, Jared Daggy, 9 plays, 6 passes for 29 yards. That's about 5 yards per pass. 3 rushes for 13 yards for the whole team. So about 4 yards per carry. Green played 4 plays. He had 2 passes for 15 yards, so about 7.5 yards per catch, more than Daggy, and 2 rushes for 22 yards, 11 yards per carry. Obviously, that doesn't really mean much, but in the grand scheme of things, especially since Green did have a fumble in the second quarter, he did only throw, I think, 3 passes. So, it is a very cherry pick stat, but it does show you that he can throw some of those short passes too. I'm kind of more in the camp that, if Green's moving the offense, don't feel compelled to put Daggy back in there. If Daggy comes out there like he did against Oklahoma, by all means, keep on giving him the ball, keep him in the game plan. But if there's, if he's making mistakes, if he's, the defense is taking away all those short routes, then I think you keep Green in there and make them kind of adapt and see if he can push the ball downfield a little bit more, or even by the metric I shared before, pass the ball further than 10 yards downfield with, some sort of accuracy. Even 40% is an improvement.
Yeah, I'm with you. I say give Green and Daggy longer time in the game when they are in. Don't be pulling them out every play and just going back and forth. I could see how that could throw off your rhythm a little bit. Maybe give Green an entire drive occasionally. And for all those people who say 2 quarterback systems don't work, I'm sure there's many examples you can point to that it doesn't, but all the examples that have proven that it can work. Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, worked. They won a national championship. Landry Jones, Blake Bell, it worked. Even in Oklahoma State recently, they had Welsh and Rudolph there. And then even though these guys kind of transferred out, Hurts and Tua did it at Alabama. Lawrence and Kelly Bryant did it at Clemson. So, I mean, without a doubt, it can work. And I think our offense has been better since Neil Brown has been doing it. So, I don't know. Those people who are blaming Neil Brown for doing it and throwing off the rhythm, I say give him credit, because not too many coaches are willing to put in 2 quarterbacks as much as he has.
Yeah, I like what he's doing too. I think it's a smart way to do it. And he did run some 2 QB looks when he was at Troy. So he has some experience with it. But he's also kind of in a tough situation too, where I don't think he fully trusts Daggy. I mean, you could tell by the play calling in that game where, let me pull up my stats here again, where he threw 14, there were 14 plays that were either slants or flat passes out of the 33 that were called. Of those 14 slants, 7 of those, half of them exactly went to Bryce Ford Wheaton. And those 7 of those catches that Wheaton had, he had 8 catches on the game, 7 catches of those were slants. So obviously that was his game plan. Once he saw that Oklahoma couldn't guard that slant route, was throw the ball to, Bryce Ford Wheaton on the outside, run the slant. And then once Oklahoma started biting down on that, that's when you started seeing Sam James get a little bit of those on the other side. But that's, he worked with what he had. If Daggy could throw another route, if there was something else he was doing consistently, I'm sure he would have called it. But I think it goes to show you that Brown's aware of the issues too. And as you kind of saw with the Green fumble, he was a little reckless with the ball, and I think that's what scares Neil Brown, because if you put Green out there, he's loose with the ball, or he tries to throw something downfield and fit something in a tighter window than what he should. Maybe 2 or 3 turnovers instead of Daggy's 1. and then we lose that game by more for sure, because then you're giving Oklahoma more offensive possessions, which means that they're going to eventually figure out how to get the ball in the end zone. So I agree the 2 QB system, I think, is for sure, the better way to go things for now. I would kind of lean, like I think I said a couple weeks ago, towards the hot hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. The hot hand would be the way to go. Daggy, again, throwing another interception that was very similar to the one at Maryland, where I don't know if it's a miscommunication between him and the wide receiver. I mean, he's putting the ball in an area where only the defender can catch it, and they're not difficult interceptions either. So, I mean, I know Green's going to make mistakes and maybe turn the ball over a little bit, but it's not like Daggy's exactly taking care of the ball every game either.
I agree. The one thing is, I don't really think the pick was that bad. Kind of given the situation, it was 3rd and I think long. He was, Brandon Yates, my favorite. Brandon Yates, my favorite offensive lineman, let his guy go in unblocked. Jared Daggy just kind of threw it up and said, either it's a punt or my receiver, goes up and gets it. And it was a badly placed ball, but, it might be better than a sack, considering how kind of inconsistent our punting game has been. So that's kind of the only way I would defend that. It could have been worse.
Yeah, it could always be worse. But it did kind of work out like a punt. But, I mean, it just seems like he does that way too much, where he just throws it up and there's no one there except a corner, a safety deep they could practically fair catch those interceptions. I don't know. It must be a miscommunication.
My theory is that he watched that Ryan Fitzpatrick no-look game-winning touchdown pass from last season and put that on repeat, and that's kind of what he's trying to emulate this year.
Well, he is failing at it. So, kind of put a bow on the quarterback situation. Yeah, I think Letty's been struggling. Obviously he had a lot of yards in the Virginia Tech game, but if you get rid of that 80-yard run, I think Letty could be playing better, and I think Green could help a lot with that. Now, with the offensive struggles, our defense played amazing. Oklahoma only had 91 total yards in the first half. However, West Virginia only had 62 total yards in the entire second half on those 3 possessions. Now, I heard Neil Brown talking about it, and we even noticed it a little bit too when we were watching the game. It looked like Oklahoma's defense was possibly offside several plays, and the refs weren't calling it until Neil Brown really got in their ear. So what did you think about that?
I noticed it too. I think they had one offside penalty, but it seemed like, I don't know if it was the same guy or several of them who were, off super quick, and it was borderline, I would say, at least 5 or 6 times during the game. To the point of the running game, our running game is kind of limited. It seems like we're running a zone, and that relies a lot on your offensive linemen being mobile and agile and getting off blocks. And if you're not quick, which, if someone's jumping your count, then that takes away that leverage of the zone blocking game. It kind of just throws a wrench in our whole thing, and we don't run outside a lot. I think we maybe ran 3 or 4 outside plays, outside of the option plays, which, are kind of, they can go inside or outside. But a lot of the plays that we're running are inside zone plays. And, those offsides or near offsides just really blow things up.
Definitely. I was thinking that too, that it does seem like we stay between the tackles a lot, and maybe some stretch plays could open up holes and opportunities for Letty to maybe cut back, or I don't know, when you're just consistently running between the tackles like it's, the 70s or something, you're probably limiting what your running back can do out there.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It's probably too late, in the year. Maybe before a bye week you could make the switch, but in a week basis, you really couldn't make a switch to like an outside zone or a gap scheme. And I don't think our offensive linemen are good enough to do more of a power run scheme. They'd be in the backfield even more than they are now. So the zone is probably the best way to go, but I would like to see more stuff on the outside. And I think we even made a comment on that when we were watching the game, where we did something to the outside and we got like a yard, and me and you were like, Well, it was nice that they ran that, even though it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that you got to keep running even if it doesn't work because, like we keep saying, you can't rely on Daggy just to drop back and throw the ball 3 straight times and expect to get first downs. I mean, eventually that's going to stall out. So even if the running game is struggling, you got to at least make them respect that a run could be happening. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. I don't have a ton to say. I mean, they are just Mr. Consistent. The defense has been great all year. They even had Oklahoma fans cheering for Caleb Williams to come in because we had Spencer Rattler so rattled out there. Yeah, I mean, they're just phenomenal. Of course, up front, we've been great. We expected that coming into the season, but I've just been really impressed with how well the secondary has been playing, and maybe that has to do a lot with the pressure we're getting up front, but the secondary has been very good this year.
Yeah, and I think a huge thing is like you said with the defensive line, we don't have to bring more than 4, so that means we get to keep that additional help in the back, and that takes up areas of the field that the quarterback wants to throw to, and especially with someone like Rattler who doesn't like pressure but also does well against the blitz. You can get him running around out there and do pretty well. And, that's kind of the area where something clicked with him, Rattler, in the fourth quarter when he led that comeback drive, is he just started taking what the defense will give you. And that's kind of what ended up with those kind of 2 longer touchdown drives that they had, as he was checking down. He wasn't trying to push the ball downfield. He was being conservative, and that's kind of how you have to beat us. You have to beat us by 1,000 cuts. And we're going to bend and hopefully not break. That's kind of the Jeff Castile thing, and he is an analyst on the team, so I'm sure he has some sort of say in the game plan. But, having someone like Adai in the back, he's, exactly what the safety should be. He's the guy who's always there making plays when we need to. Jackie Matthews has been incredible. Defensive line has been incredible. Really the only 2 weak spots that I see are Chandler Semedo in the middle against passing plays. He couldn't cover a phone booth. And then the one guy who I'm kind of torn on is Scotty Young, who played every snap on Saturday, where there are plays where it looks like he's taking the play off and he looks really bad, takes bad angles, misses tackles, and there's other plays where he looks like he's a top 3 player on our defense. So he's someone who I'd like to see more consistency of, or if he's getting tired, maybe put in some Kerry Martin. But that's really the only thing that I would change.
Yeah. I like Jordan Leslie, our defensive coordinator, a lot. I think Neil Brown's been talking about that a lot in the past few weeks in his press conferences, that when he came to West Virginia, he saw a game plan that if he really built up a strong defense, it would help us compete in the Big 12. And I agree with that because it's a league that has explosive offenses. And when Dana Holgerson was here, that's really what he focused on. And although we had some good seasons under Dana, we can't keep up with like the people Oklahoma and Texas are going to recruit. And so I think going for a defensively strong team is the way to go. I thought that was a good strategy, but man, it seems like we're here saying the same exact thing every week. We started off fast and then the offensive faded in the second half and the defense was great all game. I don't know if it's coaching, because I feel like if you have the same exact issues week in and week out, that's more on the coaches than the players.
I think, to the point of the defensive strategy, I think it kind of fits the way that Neil Brown wants to run the thing. I honestly do think that he would rather have a better offense than what he has, but we're relying heavily on the defense in the run game because, I think the game plan going into this was keep the ball out of Oklahoma's hands. When they do have the ball, don't give them deep shots, keep everything in front of you. I think that strategy works, especially when you're the underdog. That's what he did when he was at Troy against like Nebraska and LSU, limit the possessions, turn it into a dogfight, and hopefully you can squeak out something. The problem is I think our offense is just so limited. Young offensive line, a 5th-year senior who can't throw downfield, and then your other options are redshirt freshmen who, can run really well, but still lots of questions around his arm. I like our skill position players, but the offense is just, I think this is the worst offense we've had, and I don't even know when. Maybe when we had Shane Lewis at quarterback. Am I missing someone?
Brad Lewis. I remember Brad Lewis.
Yeah, Brad Lewis.
Yep. Oh yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, I mean that you brought up a good point too. We're just seeing Green come in and doing a lot of running plays. I would love for them to just open up the playbook with Green and maybe and they have had 5 wide packages with them, but it's normally draws. Which, of course, hey, man, if they're leaving the middle of the field open, do it. He's got good legs. But I would really like to see Neil Brown and the offense just open up when Green's out there. And let's see what he can do. I mean, eventually you got to test the kid.
Yeah, I would love to see some more of those option run sorts of plays, or the option pass plays, kind of like what we did in the red zone where he faked the handoff and he had those 2 dump-offs to Winston Wright. I thought those were really good, nice plays. And I think he could do that all game, and then it opens up the deep pass.
Yeah, 100%. You got anything else on Oklahoma? Or are we ready to move on?
I don't think I really have anything. The only other thing I wanted to note was, kind of the target distribution. Winston Wright actually led the team in targets with 10, but he only ended up with 65 yards. 41 of those yards were off deeper passes. So he was Deggy's preferred deep threat. And then Sam James actually got some reps this game. Unlike last game, he got 7 targets, 5 catches, 21 yards. I like seeing him out there because I do think he's one of our more explosive receivers. So, it really made me happy to see him get more snaps because I think he deserves them the way he's been playing this year.
I absolutely agree. He's actually shocked me with how well he's improved this year, it seems like. And he's not having those drop problems that has really been his biggest Achilles heel, it seems like, these past couple of years.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, let's move on to the Texas Tech game. That is going to be a 3:30 game. And Morgantown on Saturday. West Virginia is a 7-point favorite. Looking at Texas Tech, I'm actually pretty excited for this game because we're just complete opposites. Texas Tech's, of course, every year, they're a big offensive team, and they're a defense that gives up a lot of points, and we're the exact opposite. So I think it's a great matchup, and I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think this is a game that we should win easily. That was before I kind of looked at the stats. I looked at the stats a little bit and pump the brakes a little bit. I still think we can win, but the stats that worried me the most were that their first 4 games were Houston, Stephen F. Austin, FIU, Texas. Against Houston averaged 2.2 yards per rush. Stephen F. Austin averaged 1.1 yards per rush, and FIU averaged 1.9 yards per rush. Now, Texas averaged 6.5 yards per rush, but that's Texas, so Texas has Texas athletes, while the other 3 don't. So I don't know if that means anything. What do you think?
Yeah, I found a lot of interesting stuff. I saw they were talking about this in the press conference. I wish I could shout out the reporter, but I missed who asked this. But he brought up a stat. He said Texas Tech has 9 plays of 50 or more yards, which is, I think it's leading or very close to leading the NCAA. So they're a big explosive play team, which we were worried about this in like the Virginia Tech game and stuff like that, and our defense was able to shut that down. So I think that'll be a big factor because I don't see Texas Tech being a team that's just going to chip away at us and eat up clock. It's going to be whether our defense can limit those big plays. For a team like this, they don't give up a lot of sacks either. That's the big thing. Even though they have these big explosive plays, they don't give up a lot of sacks at all. They get rid of the ball real quick. And Tyler Shuck is out, and now Colin B's in. He killed us last year. That was, one of Daggy's worst games last year was against Texas Tech, and we had fits with Colin B, especially with his legs. So again, I'm really intrigued with this game. It's interesting that he's coming in. He had 14 yards. Yeah. He had 14 yards per attempt last week and over 300 yards versus Texas. Now, a lot of that might have been, just garbage yards at the end because Texas was up by a ton real early. But, I mean, they definitely have a lot of weapons. Number 13, I think it's the Iukama or something. I mean, I don't want to
I have him in my notes.
Yeah, Ezukama, he's a great player, but he had a great first 2 games this year. His last 2 games, he didn't really do a whole lot. And then you have Geiger, who's the exact opposite, number 10 for them. He didn't do a whole lot this first 2 games. Last 2 games, his stats have been great. I'm really intrigued to watch this game.
I mean, it definitely seems like Slow or Slock or however you say his name is really like to target Izukama or however you say that. I think the first 2 games he had like 15 or 12 or 13 catches or something crazy combined. He did have, I think he had 7 catches against Texas, but Texas, I think he only put up like 50 yards, so they kept the lid on. And I think that's something WVU can do. I think it's an interesting matchup because, Texas Tech, outside of, I think their first 2 games, they haven't ran the ball extremely well. So as long as, we can focus on the pass, keeping the top on and, forcing them to play underneath. We did a good job against Rattler, I think, when he was scrambling. We did a good job against Burmeister, against Virginia Tech. So it seems like we've improved against scrambling quarterbacks. And hopefully just by our play style of, shutting down a team's offense for the most part, maybe puts them out of a rhythm a little bit and kind of gives us a little bit of an edge. I am concerned, like I said, about their rush defense because it looks like it's pretty solid. I also looked at, how running quarterbacks do against that, so that, maybe this is a game for Green, and they're even good against them. So Houston had a quarterback who ran 13 times, 28 yards. Texas's Thompson, he had 7 rushes for 29 yards. So running quarterbacks aren't even that successful against them. So this might be a Deggy game, which worries me, but maybe this is something he can get back on track with too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, that's another reason why it's good to have 2 quarterbacks in there because, they both have different strengths. You brought up Texas Tech's rushing attack. I was looking at that as well. And even though Texas Tech's always the team that passes a lot, I mean, they average a lot more rush yards than we do. They average 160 a game. We only average 117. And the biggest eye-opener for me with that is they average over 5 yards, 5.08 yards a carry, which is awesome. We only average 3.75. So they definitely have an explosive offense. And then every week I bring up the turnovers. They actually have 8 turnovers, just like we do for the year. However, they have 6 takeaways, whereas we only have 3. So It will be interesting to see, how that counterbalances, whether, the turnovers are even, whether their run game beating our run game is the difference. It's going to be interesting.
I think the Oklahoma game is a great lead into this game too, because, you think Oklahoma, you think fast paced, tons of plays, and that's how Texas Tech wants to play too. So, even though we ended up losing to Oklahoma, we kept it close and we proved that game plan works. So I think going into this game where Texas Tech obviously wants to play fast, they want to get a lot of, plays out there, maximize their chances to get yards. That means our team shouldn't get frustrated whenever we're not scoring points, and that also means that the other team has to play at our pace, which, I think that's something else that had to throw off Rattler in that offense too, was against Oklahoma, was that they weren't getting to play at their pace. They weren't getting to, go out in a shootout and keep their rhythm. They had to sit for long periods. They had to, had 3 and outs and had to wait. You do the same thing against other Big 12 teams like, your Texas Techs, Baylor, things like that. It could throw them off the rhythm, and then, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that should be a point of emphasis every game for us, is to chew up a lot of clock and keep our defense fresh. Because honestly, I think that was the biggest issue in the second half for our defense last game is after a while they just got tired because we weren't chewing up as much clock as we did in the first half. Just to emphasize even more how we are complete opposites of Texas Tech, we say every week, we're fast starters and then we fade. Texas Tech seems to be the opposite. They don't really put up a whole lot of points in the first quarter. However, late in the second quarter and into the second half is where they have, almost all of their points. And so it'll be interesting to see if we jump out to a big lead. I wouldn't get too comfortable because if we fade away, Texas Tech has proven that they can score a lot of points quick.
Yeah, and they were down 21-7 to Houston at halftime, scored 31 unanswered. Albeit Houston, while being 3-1, has beaten one non-FBS school and two teams who haven't won a game yet. So
nice.
It's hard to say how good Houston is. And they were losing to Stephen F. Austin, which isn't even an FBS team at halftime. They were losing 13-6. And they had to come back and win it in the second half. So, and FIU, isn't FIU the team who also beat down on Long Island before we did? So
I think you're right.
that just kind of goes to show you the level of competition that Texas Tech has played. And I'm really hoping that Texas game was kind of just kind of shows you what their level of talent is against real Power 5 teams is. So, this could be a game, maybe we actually crack 30 points and win by double digits. That would be my ideal outcome for the game, and I think it's realistic.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's realistic as well. We're home, which, you don't want to put too much, stock into that. These guys have played a lot of football games in their careers. However, they're still kids. They're still college players. I think that is a big advantage when you don't have to travel. You're playing on a field you're familiar with. You got crowds cheering for you. So I agree. I want to see WVU come out here and, for once, we just have a nice, relaxing win where we don't just fade in the second half and we're biting our nails all the way to the end.
Yeah, and I think this is a game that if we can get control of early, like you said, we can try out some things that, you can't try out against Oklahoma or Virginia Tech. And you don't really want to share against an LIU either. So you can go out there and do something different, do some more maybe jet actions, some, more screenplays, different route types. I don't know, just different ways of being creative with the offense. And maybe you let Green throw a little bit more just to kind of get him into rhythm, feeling good. Without blowing the game. Now, the one thing that does concern me about playing at home is if, Green starts out hot and they do the rotation, is the crowd going to get mad when Deggy goes back in? If Deggy, starts inconsistent, are they going to do what Oklahoma fans did to Rattler and chant the backup's name? I don't want to see that.
I don't,
and, WVU fans are just like a lot of other fans in the country where they're going to be quick to start a chant. So I'm hoping we hold off until, someone actually does something that's benchable worthy, like throwing multiple picks in one game or tons of turnovers, making bad decisions. So I don't think either of them deserve to have greatly reduced playing time at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I even saw someone tweeting about that earlier. It's the one thing they don't want to see Saturday is the crowd just all in unison, booing and chanting for Daggy to come out. I'm with you. It's a bad look. These guys, they're still young. I get being passionate. I get booing when you don't like what you're seeing, but you gotta be a little reasonable too. And who knows? We might have recruits this weekend. People are watching us, and that's a bad look just for the whole fan base, for the whole school. So, yeah, I'm with you. I hope we don't see that on Saturday. Definitely. All right, you got anything else?
No, that was all I had for Texas Tech.
Yeah, same here. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. So, let's wrap this up then. This is the Q Country Roads podcast, and we will be back here next week to recap this game and then preview the following game. So we will see you guys later. I'm Tyler Pepe.
I'm Brandon Cork, and thanks for listening.